It feels like nothing is working. That's when money comes. Neville Goddard taught that the very moment your striving falls silent is often the very moment the unseen wish quietly becomes flesh. In the first book of Kings, chapter 19, it is written, "And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind rent the mountains, and brake in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind, and after the wind an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake, and after the earthquake a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire, and after the fire a still small voice. And Elijah, wrapping his face in his mantle at the mouth of the cave, is you, standing on a ledge, waiting for your good to arrive with noise, with evidence, with something you can point to and say, 'There, now I believe.'" And Neville would stop you right there and say, "Do you see it? The answer was never in the wind of your frantic effort, never in the earthquake of your worry, never in the fire of your desperate checking. The answer came only after all of that had spent itself, in a voice so quiet you could have missed it. And that voice was never outside the cave, it was the awareness of your own I am, speaking from within. And if you have been striving, applying, calling, refreshing your accounts a dozen times a day, and still nothing seems to move, you are not failing, you are simply standing in the wind and the earthquake and the fire, waiting for a voice that can only be heard once you stop shouting over it. And you are not the only one who has stood in that cave feeling forgotten. So let us claim it now, in the first person, in the present tense, as though it is already the quiet truth of your life. Say it with me. I am at rest, in the fortune already mine. I am the stillness money is rushing to fill. Imagination creates my reality. Again, I am at rest in the fortune already mine. I am the stillness money is rushing to fill. Imagination creates my reality. And if you would like tomorrow's quiet teaching to find you the same way this one found you, let subscribing be the small voice that keeps calling you back here. Before we go any further, if something in you just went still reading those words, type the 2 words "it's done" into the comments right now. Let it be your seal, not a wish, not a maybe, but a quiet knowing, set down in writing. The first key is, it is not the struggle that pays you, it is the surrender that pays you. Picture a woman who has sent out 40 applications this month, who checks her email every hour, who feels her stomach tighten every time the phone stays silent. And she says out loud, "It feels like nothing is working." And she is right. Nothing outward is working, because outward motion was never the mechanism. The mechanism has always been the inner scene held quietly in imagination, until it feels true. So when the striving finally exhausts itself, when she is too tired to refresh the page one more time, and she simply sits and breathes, and for one unguarded moment feels what it would feel like to already hold the offer in her hand, that unguarded moment is worth more than 40 applications, because in it she has stopped standing in the wind of effort and stepped into the stillness where the voice actually speaks. Notice too how strength and struggle can feel almost identical from the inside. Both quicken the pulse, both keep the hands busy, both whisper that you are doing something, which is exactly why so many mistake exhaustion for progress, and keep gripping long after gripping has stopped serving them. But Neville taught that the outer man must grow quiet before the inner man can be heard at all, not because effort is shameful, but because effort keeps the attention fixed on lack, on the empty inbox, on the silent phone, on the thing not yet here, while surrender turns the attention, gently, deliberately, toward the thing already felt as done. This is why so many report that the call came, the check came, the door opened, right after they stopped chasing it, right after they said, "I give up trying to force this," and something in them quietly assumed it was already done, that giving up was never defeat. It was the surrender of the outer man, so the inner man could finally be heard. Think of it as setting down a heavy bag you did not even realize you were carrying. The shoulders drop before the mind understands why. And in that dropping, something opens. So this week, notice the moment you feel most like nothing is working, and instead of gripping tighter, let your shoulders drop. Let your breath slow, and ask only one question. How would I feel if this were already handled? And rest there, even 10 seconds, because that rest is not laziness. It is the doorway. And every time you find it again, you will recognize it a little faster than the time before. I already feel it done. I no longer need to force it. The second key is, it is not the wind and the earthquake of your effort. It is the still small voice of your assumption. Think of a man pacing his kitchen at midnight, bills spread across the table, mind racing through every possible way to make the numbers work, borrowing from one place to cover another, calling this person, emailing that one, and none of it moving the needle, because all of that is wind. All of that is earthquake. All of that is fire, loud, urgent, visible, and utterly unable to reach the place where his good is actually stored. His good is stored in the awareness that calls itself I am. The very awareness that was speaking quietly beneath all that noise the entire time, waiting for him to stop pacing long enough to hear it, and notice what he is actually doing when he paces. He is trying to think his way into a feeling, when the truth, Neville taught, runs the other direction entirely. You do not think your way into the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You assume the feeling first, and let the thinking, the ideas, the calls that actually matter, flow out of that feeling afterward. This is why his pacing produces nothing but more pacing. It is thought without root, motion without soil. So instead of pacing, imagine him sitting down, closing his eyes, and whispering inwardly, I am provided for. Not shouting it, not forcing it, simply letting it settle the way a calm voice settles a frightened child. Quietly, certainly, without needing to prove itself. This is the state akin to rest that Neville pointed to again and again, not a technique to perform, but a settling to allow, and here is what makes people miss it. They expect their relief to arrive wearing the same loudness as their fear did. They wait for a dramatic sign, a sudden windfall announced with trumpets, a phone that rings the instant they believe. But the voice that actually moves money is never dramatic. It is small. It is calm. It is almost embarrassingly quiet. So quiet that the very next morning, the man from our story nearly misses it. An ordinary email, a small opportunity he almost deletes without reading, and only because something in him has grown still enough does he pause and answer it. And that quiet answer becomes the very thread his provision travels on. If you keep waiting for your good to feel as urgent as your worry, you will walk right past the moment it arrives, wearing its plain, unremarkable clothing. So tonight, when the noise in your mind grows loud, do not add more noise to argue with it. Do not outshout the fear with louder hope. Simply grow quiet, quieter than the worry itself, and let the small voice underneath finish its sentence. I am already secure. I am already whole. And be still. The third key is, it is not what your bank account shows tonight. It is what your imagination rehearses tonight. Walk through an ordinary day with me. 7 in the morning. You check your balance and your stomach drops. 9 in the morning. An application you were hopeful about comes back with a polite no. Noon. A bill reminder lands in your inbox. 3 in the afternoon, a friend cancels lunch, and you suspect it is because money is tight for her too. 6 in the evening, you scroll through other people's good news feeling further behind than ever, and by every outward measure, it feels like nothing is working. All day it has confirmed itself again and again, and here is the part almost everyone misses. The day was never lying to you. The day was simply reporting the state you have been living in. A mirror can only show what stands before it. So instead of arguing with the mirror, Neville taught that you go to the one place the mirror cannot follow you, the quiet room of your own imagination, and there you change what stands before it. Notice, too, that this day did not begin at 7 this morning. It began the night before, in whatever scene you dwelt on as you drifted toward sleep. If last night's last waking thought was worry chasing worry, then today was only that seed breaking the surface, right on schedule. So the day you are living now is really yesterday's imagination wearing today's clothes, which means the day you will live tomorrow is being decided in this very room tonight. So at 9 that night, instead of replaying the rejection, instead of revising the canceled lunch into another proof of lack, you lie back, you grow drowsy on purpose, and you construct one small scene, perhaps opening an envelope and feeling the relief of a check already deposited, perhaps hearing a voice you trust say, "It is handled," and you do not merely picture it at arm's length. You feel it. You let the gratitude of it move through your chest as though it already happened. This is living in the end. This is revision, taking the day's rejection and refusing to let it be the final word, replaying instead the version of the day you wished had happened until it feels at least as real as the one that did. And here is the secret nobody tells you. The version rehearsed with feeling outweighs the version merely lived through with the eyes. Because imagination, not evidence, is the real substance shaping what tomorrow will show you. It is not the day behind you that has power. It is the scene you fall asleep inside that has power. Think of a candle burning steady in a window while a storm moves through the streets outside. The storm is loud. The storm is real to the senses. The rain hammers the glass and the wind rattles the frame. But the candle does not negotiate with the storm. It does not dim itself to match the mood of the weather. It simply keeps burning. The same size flame, the same warm light, untouched. And notice, the candle never argues with the storm. It never sends its light outside to fight the wind. It simply tends its own small fire and lets that fire define the room. That is what your rehearsal must become. A flame that does not shrink because the day was loud. A flame that does not need the day's evidence to agree with it before it will burn. It is not the size of the storm outside that decides your flame. It is the steadiness of the hand shielding it. So tonight, whatever your day handed you, however many no's arrived, however tight the room around you felt, before you sleep, spend 3 unhurried minutes rehearsing the end already fulfilled. Guard that little flame the way you would guard it from a real wind, gently, deliberately, without panic, and let that steady inward fire be the last thing your senses register before the dark takes you. Because the version of tomorrow now forming has nothing to do with what today's mirror showed you. I rehearse the feeling of it done, and I let the day's noise fall away. The fourth key is, it is not the timing you fear you've missed. It is the state you have never left. So many carry a quiet dread that they started too late, applied too late, saved too late, prayed too late, loved too late, as though there is a clock somewhere deciding whether they still qualify for good fortune. But Neville Goddard taught that you do not live in time, you live in state, and a state has no calendar, only a feeling that repeats itself until it hardens into fact. Think of a man in his 40s who watches younger colleagues rise past him. And every morning he tells himself the same quiet sentence. My window has closed. He does not shout it. He does not even fully notice he is saying it. It simply hums beneath his thoughts the way a refrigerator hums beneath a kitchen. And because that hum is what he is assuming, that hum is what keeps arranging his days, the missed calls that never get returned, the ideas he swallows before he speaks them, the raises that quietly go to someone else. None of it is the clock punishing him. All of it is the self-concept he never questioned, faithfully producing more evidence for itself. And here is what Neville would have you see. The calendar cannot lock a door. Only belief can lock a door. And only belief can unlock it again. Pause for a moment and pick one real fear about timing that has been sitting quietly in your mind, perhaps the fear that you are too old to begin, too far behind to catch up, too late to still be chosen for the thing you want, and gently ask yourself, is this a fact of the clock, or is this simply a feeling I have kept assuming out of habit? because the moment you stop assuming lateness, the clock stops mattering entirely. It never had authority over you to begin with. It only ever borrowed its authority from your own quiet agreement. Withdraw that agreement today. Walk through this evening as someone for whom it is always the right hour, and notice how differently a room feels when you enter it that way. The door that seemed to have closed was never actually locked. It was only ever guarded by a belief standing patiently at the threshold, waiting for you to stop saluting it. And beliefs can be laid down the very same way they were once picked up, quietly, deliberately, without ceremony. I am never late. I am the state that decides the hour. If this teaching is meeting you at the right moment, subscribe now so tomorrow's still small voice can reach you too. One quiet notification may be the very nudge you've been waiting for. The fifth key is persistence in the assumption, the sleep that feels like a small death. And everyone who tells you not yet is only you, pushed out, wearing another face. This is the deepest of the keys. The one that asks the most of you, and the one that pays the most. So let us take it slowly, in pieces, the way you would walk down a stairway in the dark, one step at a time, trusting the next step is there before your foot ever finds it. First, consider persistence. A woman is told no by her bank 3 separate times over 3 separate months. Each no arriving with fresh paperwork proving why she does not qualify. Each no dressed up in official language, stamped, signed, undeniable to the natural eye, and each time the temptation is to let the no revise her inward assumption downward, to start believing the paperwork more than the feeling she has been quietly holding in secret. But persistence means something very specific here. It does not mean trying the same outer approach again and again, hoping the world grows tired and relents. It means returning, every single time the no arrives, to the very same inward feeling of already being approved, refusing to let the outer evidence edit the inner scene. Neville taught that the assumption, though denied, though contradicted, though laughed at by appearances, hardens into fact if only you persist, not because persistence forces the world to comply, not because it wears the world down like water on stone, but because persistence is what finally lets the assumption become natural, unquestioned, the very air you breathe, and a state that has become the air you breathe cannot help but express itself outwardly. It must. It has no other choice. So on her 4th attempt, nothing about her paperwork was different. The numbers were the same numbers. The history was the same history, but she was different. She no longer walked in hoping. She no longer walked in rehearsing her explanation in case they asked. She walked in as someone who already had the money, quiet, unhurried, almost bored by the outcome, because the outcome had already happened inside her. And this time the answer changed, not because the officer grew kinder, not because the bank changed its policy, but because she finally arrived as someone the world could no longer say no to. And this is the part so many miss. They count the no's as evidence against them, when every no was only ever evidence that the old self was still the one showing up. Change who shows up. And the no's have nothing left to answer. Second, consider the sleep that feels like a small death. Neville often pointed to the state akin to sleep, that drowsy threshold just before true sleep takes you, that soft country between waking and dreaming, where the striving mind finally loosens its grip, and the deeper imagination lies open, unguarded, malleable. And he called it a kind of death, not a frightening one, but a gentle and necessary one. Because in that moment the old self, the anxious self, the checking self, the self that refreshes the account and reads the bad news twice, is laid down completely, set down like a heavy coat at the door, and whoever rises the next morning is subtly, quietly, unmistakably a different person. This is why so many report that a shift they worked toward for months finally moved after one particular night. Not because that night held some magic the others lacked, but because that was the night they finally let themselves die a little, let the worry actually stop, instead of merely pretending to relax while the mind kept working underneath. So tonight, when you lie down, do not merely close your eyes, dwell. Dwell in the felt sense of the wish already fulfilled, not straining to picture it, but recalling it the way you would recall something that already happened to you. The warmth of it, the relief of it, the ordinariness of it, because by then it should feel almost unremarkable. And let that feeling be the last thing your senses register before the dark takes you. Because you are not performing a technique in that moment, you are attending your own burial and your own resurrection in the same breath, laying the lacking self to rest, letting the fulfilled self rise in its place before the sun does. Third, consider that everyone is you, pushed out, wearing another face, the loan officer, the landlord, the client who has not yet paid, the sister who doubts you at every family dinner, the stranger who looks at you a little too long in the grocery line. None of them are separate powers deciding your fate from outside you. Neville taught plainly that the outer world is consciousness outpictured, a vast mirror, and every face you meet is your own state reflected back at you wearing a stranger's features. So when you change what you assume about yourself, you are not hoping the world changes its mind about you. You are changing the only thing that was ever producing the world's response in the first place. Think of a landlord who has been firm about a late payment for weeks, curt in his messages, short on his phone calls, and one evening, instead of dreading the conversation, rehearsing your excuses on the drive over, you quietly assume within yourself, I am someone money flows easily toward. I am already provided for. You do not rehearse arguments. You do not plan your defense. You simply carry that calm certainty into the room the way you'd carry a lit candle into a dark house, and inexplicably, the same landlord offers an extension he never once offered before. Not because he suddenly became generous, not because the timing happened to favor you, but because you met him as a different person, and he, like every mirror, could only respond to the person actually standing in front of him. This is not coincidence, and it is not luck. This is the mirror doing exactly and only what mirrors have ever done. So persistence, the nightly small death, and the mirror of everyone around you. These are not three separate practices to juggle. They are three names for the same single act, staying faithfully assumed in the state of the wish fulfilled, until the outer world has no honest choice left but to agree with you, until the no's run out of places to hide, until the mirror has nothing left to show you but the fortune you have already. Quietly, patiently, become, I persist gently, I rest nightly in the end, I meet only myself wherever I go. The sixth key is, it is not a miracle arriving from outside. It is you, waking up already rich in imagination. When the money finally comes, when the offer finally lands, when the debt finally clears, it will be tempting to call it luck, timing, a stranger's kindness, a stroke of good fortune that simply happened to fall your way. But by now you know better. It was never a stranger's gift. It was the harvest of a state you quietly, faithfully occupied until it could no longer remain unseen. Picture a man who spent 3 weeks lying down each night and simply feeling, without straining, without checking, the quiet relief of a particular bill already paid. He did not mention it to anyone. He did not track his progress. He simply returned to that felt ending night after night, the way you'd return to a familiar room, and on an ordinary Tuesday, with no warning, an old account he had forgotten about, issued a refund that covered the exact amount. And his first instinct, like most people's, was to call it a coincidence, a fluke of paperwork catching up with itself. But Neville would ask him gently to look again. Because there are no fluke arrivals in consciousness, there is only the outer world quietly rearranging itself to agree with an inner state that has already been assumed long enough to harden into fact. This is why it so often feels like nothing is working right up until the moment everything works at once, because the assumption was ripening in the dark the entire time, unseen the way a seed is unseen beneath the soil, doing its patient work long before anything breaks the surface where the eye can find it. And this is also why the arrival, when it finally shows itself, so rarely announces itself loudly. It tends to slip in through an ordinary door, a forgotten refund, a returned call, a small unexpected opening, wearing the plain clothes of an average morning, precisely because it was never meant to look like a miracle. It was only ever meant to look like Tuesday. So do not wait for trumpets to confirm that your inner work was real. The sunrise does not announce itself with noise. It simply arrives, quietly, on schedule, because the turning has already happened long before the light appears. And so it is with you. The turning happened the night you first felt the wish fulfilled and meant it. Everything after that was only the world catching up to what you had already become within. So when your good finally shows itself, receive it simply, without needing to explain it away as chance, without shrinking it down to fit some story about luck. Let yourself say, "Of course, I have been living there and feeling for weeks. This was never going to end any other way." And let that quiet confidence become the new floor you stand on for the very next wish, and the one after that. Because once you have seen the harvest come from a seed you could not see, you no longer need proof before you plant again. I am the harvest of the state I have been living in. I receive it simply, as my own. Here is the whole picture. It is not the struggle that pays you, it is the surrender that pays you. It is not the wind and the earthquake of your effort. It is the still small voice of your assumption. It is not what your bank account shows tonight. It is what your imagination rehearses tonight. It is not the timing you fear you've missed. It is the state you have never left. It is not the strangers who say not yet. It is you, pushed out, wearing their faces. And it is not a miracle from outside. It is you, waking up already rich in imagination. And here is the single recognition beneath all six. These were never six separate keys, they were six turns of the very same key, the turning away from the outer noise and toward the inner voice. That is the whole of the teaching, that is the whole of the practice, that is the whole of the promise held inside the words. It feels like nothing is working. That's when money comes. If you are ready to stop practicing this only when you remember, and start living in the end as a daily way of being, the 21-day reality shift was built for exactly this. 21 short daily teachings, walking you gently through assumption, revision, and the sleep that changes who you are by morning. It is available now for a small one-time investment. Fully guaranteed. If it does not deepen your practice, you may ask for your money back within 30 days. No questions. The link is in the description below, and it is there whenever you feel the quiet pull to go further. So let us end where we began. In the first person, in the present tense, I am at rest in the fortune already mine. I am the stillness money is rushing to fill. Imagination creates my reality. And the next time it feels like nothing is working, remember what you now know. That is not the wind. That is not the earthquake. That is not the fire. That is simply the noise settling so the small voice can finally be heard. And that voice has always been the sound of money. Already, quietly, on its way.